Did you know that the American Civil War wasn't just about soldiers clashing on land? The ocean saw battles too, with naval warfare taking center stage. But before we dive into the waves of history, let's shake up some other misconceptions about the American Civil War. Hold on tight, because we are about to sail on a journey beyond the textbooks and into the heart of some seriously fascinating history. Civil War surgeries were all done without painkillers. While it's a popular scene in movies, a soldier screaming as his limbs sawed off, that's more Hollywood than history. Anesthesia was actually used in about 95% of all surgeries during the Civil War, says the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. So most soldiers weren't fully awake and feeling every cut. Basically, the use of these drugs was relatively new, and Civil War surgeons didn't have a lot of experience with them, but at least they tried to make surgeries less painful. There were instances when surgeries were done without anesthesia, but they were rare. Often it was because of concerns about drug side effects, especially with gunshot wounds. Yet of the countless surgeries performed during the war, only 254 were done without any anesthesia. Only men fought in the Civil War. Even though women weren't officially allowed in the military, hundreds defied the rules. Between 400 to 750 women channeled their inner warriors and sneakily made their way to the front lines. But with only about 2.75 million soldiers fighting, how did they blend in? Some women rocked the pre-combat physicals by passing as men, while others snuck into camps once battle started. Once inside, these ladies weren't just standing by. We're talking real action. Spy missions, Sherlock-level investigations, and taking on direct combat roles. Picture James Bond, but trading in the tuxedo for corsets. Lincoln was universally loved in the North. Everyone thinks that Lincoln was loved in the North. Let's debunk that. The Civil War wasn't just about the North versus the South. There were deep divisions even within the North itself, and we're not just talking about disagreements on what to have for breakfast. Though bacon versus sausage debates did get quite heated. During the Civil War, the North wasn't fully united. Copperheads or peace Democrats opposed Lincoln's war policies. Some were die-hard fans of the South, while others believed in states' rights without federal interference. And speaking of critics, Lincoln had a big one in Horatio Seymour, the head honcho of New York. These two had major beef, especially during the Civil War draft riots in 1863. But here's the tea. Many New Yorkers despised the Enrollment Act of 1863, which allowed wealthier individuals to pay to avoid the draft. This led to violent riots targeting African Americans and their businesses. Seymour controversially seemed to side with the rioters, even referring to them as "my friends." In Ohio, Clement L. Vallandigham, an ex-congressman, criticized the war. He was then captured by Union troops, but Lincoln threw a curveball. Instead of prison, he sent Vallandigham on an enforced vacation to the Confederacy. Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis always wanted the South to break away. Both of these men initially hesitated about secession. Jefferson Davis, the future president of the Confederacy, was once a senator from Mississippi. When the state decided to leave the Union in 1861, he chose loyalty to his state over the country, despite saying it was the saddest day of my life. Back then, people often felt a deeper connection to their state than to the nation. But don't get it twisted. While Davis might have had a will he, won't he, Ross and Rachel from Friends relationship with separation, he was crystal clear about his feelings on slavery. He once claimed that African slavery in the US was a blessing. As for Robert E. Lee, he too was torn. He didn't support separation until his home state of Virginia decided to leave the Union. Then Lee resigned from the US military and joined the Confederate side. By the way, Davis later really embraced the Confederate cause. In a fiery 1862 speech, he expressed his surprise that the South had stayed with the North for as long as they did. So both men had complex feelings, but when push came to shove, they sided with the South. The Emancipation Proclamation freed every slave in the US. In 1863, Lincoln dropped the mic with the Emancipation Proclamation. But here's the plot twist. It didn't free all slaves. It's like offering free Wi-Fi, but only if you're sitting in a certain part of the cafe. Border states like Kentucky and Delaware were excluded. However, the war's purpose evolved. It wasn't just about uniting the country, but ending slavery, complicating international dynamics. This meant that nations like the UK and France had to reconsider backing the Confederacy. While the Emancipation Proclamation had its impact, full abolition needed more milestones, beginning with the 13th Amendment in December 1865. The Gettysburg Address envelope myth. Abraham Lincoln, on a bumpy train, scribbling the Gettysburg Address on the back of an envelope. Well, sorry to burst your bubble, but history's more of a party pooper here. Lincoln's secretary clarified that given the train's movement, writing would have been near impossible. While Lincoln did finalize the speech that morning, it wasn't the last-minute scribble note many imagined. And get this, even on the day of the Gettysburg Address, Lincoln wasn't the main attraction. Shocking, right? Edward Everett, a renowned scholar and speaker, was the keynote speaker. He delivered a 2-hour-long speech, pouring out his heart and months of careful research. But as history shows, Lincoln's concise words stole the limelight in minutes. Now, you might think Everett was bitter about Lincoln overshadowing his grand speech, but the opposite is true. Everett graciously admitted that Lincoln captured the essence of the day better in 2 minutes than he did in 2 hours. The Civil War was only fought on land. When most think of the American Civil War, they think of brutal battles on grassy fields and rolling hills, with soldiers in blue and gray locked in deadly combat. But guess what? There was a lot of action on the water too. The naval warfare was huge. The Union victory at the Battle of Port Royal and the deadlock at the Battle of Hampton Roads stand as a testament. The Civil War had its fair share of naval innovations. A notable moment was when the Confederate submarine, the Hunley, became the first of its kind to sink an enemy ship, the USS Housatonic, in 1864. Now, here's a twist. Not all naval battles occurred in American waters. In June 1864, the English Channel, the waters off Cherbourg, France, the Confederate ship, the CSS Alabama, was docked, nursing its battle scars and gearing up for its next move. Now imagine this, the Alabama wasn't just any ship. It had plundered over 64 US ships, causing immense damage. The USS Kearsarge, commanded by John A. Winslow, was hot on Alabama's trail. Hearing about Alabama's docking, Winslow knew he had a golden chance. The two ships met 9 miles off Cherbourg's coast. Alabama fired first, but was in for a surprise. The Kearsarge had secret armor. Soon Alabama was sinking as its white flag was raised. Just when things looked bad for the Alabama captain, a British ship picked him up and some of his crew, helping them escape. Free states offered Black Americans freedom. Here's some trivia that might surprise you. Free states didn't exactly mean freedom for Black Americans. While northern states did remove slavery between the late 1700s and early 1800s, the road to genuine equality was still miles away. By 1856, guess how many states allowed Black men to vote? Just 6. But that's not all. Many of these so-called free states had segregation laws in place. Some Midwestern states went even further, banning Black citizens from setting foot within their borders. So history often has its complexities. While progress was made, it was often slower and more uneven than we might imagine. Keep your curiosity alive, question the known narratives, and always dig a little deeper.